I've always considered myself a skeptic. So when my friends Anna and Mike suggested we play with an old Ouija board they found in Mike's grandma's attic, I shrugged it off as harmless entertainment. We chose the setting that offered the most ambiance, an abandoned house at the end of Willow Street, infamous for being haunted. A widower, old man Jenkins, had lived there alone for years after his wife disappeared mysteriously. When he passed away, the house was left to decay, fueling the local ghost tales. That night, the moon hung low in the sky, casting long spectral shadows. The old house creaked ominously as we pushed open the rickety front door. We set up in the dilapidated living room, the Ouija board resting on a crooked coffee table. Dust hung heavy in the air and the peeling wallpaper bore an uncanny resemblance to disfigured faces. Anna, always the most adventurous, placed her fingers on the planchette. "Is there anyone here with us?" she asked. The planchette didn't move. We shared a laugh, our shared nerves echoing through the room. "Maybe you didn't ask nicely," Mike said, placing his fingers on the planchette too. "Is there anyone here who wants to speak with us?" The room was deathly still. Then, to my surprise, the planchette jerked towards yes. I stared at Anna and Mike, convinced they were messing with me. "We mean no harm," Anna said, her voice shaky. "What is your name?" The planchette moved again, spelling out Eliza. A chill ran down my spine. Eliza was Old Man Jenkins's wife's name. We continued to converse, the planchette dancing beneath our fingers. Eliza was trapped, she said. She needed help. A sudden gust of wind blew out the candles. In the darkness, I felt the air grow colder, heavy with dread. Then an ethereal figure materialized in front of us. A woman glowing faintly, staring at us with pleading eyes. It was Eliza, I realized with a start. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Then, as if turning up the volume, we heard her whispers. She was trapped, she said, just like on the board. Jenkins had trapped her soul in the house. She led us to a secret compartment behind a loose brick in the fireplace. Inside, we found a small box. With trembling hands, Anna opened it, revealing a locket with Eliza's picture. "Free me," the apparition whispered again, fading in and out of existence. In a decision that felt more instinctual than rational, we took the locket and buried it in the garden, beneath the old willow tree. When we returned to the house, Eliza's spirit was still there, but this time she smiled, her ethereal form brighter. "Thank you," she mouthed before fading away, the room suddenly feeling lighter. We left the house that night, the echo of our experience reverberating in our minds. As we walked away, I looked back. I could have sworn I saw a woman standing by the window waving goodbye. I guess I'm not such a skeptic anymore. For as long as I can remember, I'd held an uncanny fascination for the supernatural. This passion led me to an old antique store where I found it, an authentic, age-stained Ouija board. One quiet Friday night, I decided to test it out. My apartment, a structure from the late 19th century, seemed the perfect setting for a rendezvous with the unseen. I set the board on my coffee table, the room lit only by the dim flicker of candles. The planchette, smooth and cold to the touch, glided effortlessly as I ran my fingers over the board, tracing the worn letters and numbers. Taking a deep breath, I placed my fingers lightly on the planchette. "Is there anyone here who wishes to communicate?" I asked, my voice wavering slightly in the hushed stillness. The planchette remained motionless for several minutes. Just as I was about to abandon my experiment, it shuddered and began to move, tracing a path to the yes. I felt a shiver run down my spine. "What is your name?" I asked, my breath hitching. Again, the planchette moved, more decisively this time, spelling out Elijah, Elijah. A normal enough name, I mused. Curiosity now replacing fear. I asked Elijah about his past, his death, his connection to my apartment. The answers were disjointed, yet there was a tangible sadness that hung in the air. Elijah was a misunderstood soul, trapped in the unseen realm. Days turned into weeks, and the Ouija board became a regular part of my evenings. Elijah and I built an odd friendship. He told me stories of the old world, and I shared tales of the present. Until one night, the atmosphere changed. I placed my fingers on the planchette as usual. "Elijah, are you there?" This time, the planchette jerked violently towards no. A chill ran through me, colder than anything I'd felt before. Then it moved again, slowly, spelling out RUN. Suddenly, my apartment darkened, the candles snuffing out as if hit by a harsh gust of wind. I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding in my chest. The room temperature plummeted as I fumbled for my phone, desperate for light. As the room illuminated, my eyes widened in horror. The walls, once covered with family photos and artwork, were now smeared with grotesque symbols in a dark, viscous liquid. My stomach churned. I could feel a presence behind me, colder and darker than the deepest abyss. I turned slowly, the sight greeting me making my blood run cold. In the corner of the room, a figure lurked, formless but radiating malevolence. Its eyes, two glowing orbs of raw terror, fixed on me. I tried to scream, but no sound left my lips. Just as I thought I was done for, a soft light emerged from the Ouija board. The planchette moved on its own, spelling out ELIJAH. The figure hissed, retreating as the light expanded, filling the room. When I dared to open my eyes again, the entity was gone, my apartment back to its original state. The board lay inert on the coffee table, the planchette centered on goodbye. I never used the Ouija board again, the trauma too potent to ignore. It rests in the back of my closet now, a chilling reminder of my dance with the unseen. As for Elijah, I can only hope he found peace. But whatever else lurked in the shadows, it's a horror I'm not ready to face again. I've always been fascinated with the unknown, the mysteries of the afterlife, the questions that lurk in the shadows. So when I found an ancient, slightly charred Ouija board tucked away in my grandmother's attic, I couldn't resist. My friends Sarah and Mike shared my curiosity. They were eager to partake in this spiritual game. As dusk settled, we gathered around a wooden table, our only source of light a cluster of flickering candles casting long, dancing shadows. The Ouija board lay before us, its surface worn and etched with letters, numbers, and the words yes and no. A heart-shaped planchette, its glass eye reflecting the dim candlelight, awaited our touch. We placed our fingers on it lightly, and I initiated the age-old ritual. "Is there anyone here who wishes to speak?" A cold gust of wind blew out the candles. The room plunged into darkness, a heavy silence descending. My heart pounded against my chest as I hastily lit the candles again. The planchette had moved to yes. "Who are we speaking to?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. The planchette began moving again, gliding over the letters, HARRY. "Harry," we wrote down, trying to hide our nervousness. "What do you want?" Mike asked, his fingers trembling on the planchette. There was a brief pause before it moved again. FREEDOM. My blood ran cold. I glanced at my friends, their faces pale in the flickering light. "How can we help you?" I asked, voice shaking. A gust of wind swept through the room again, this time stronger, making the windows rattle violently. The planchette moved on its own, spelling out a sentence that chilled us to our core. BURNTHEBOARD. We can't," Sarah stuttered. "It's not ours to destroy." Silence filled the room. Then a sudden bone-rattling bang erupted from the fireplace, causing us to jump in our seats. The ashes stirred and a piece of charred paper floated out, landing on the table. It was an old newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. The headline read, "Local man tragically dies in house fire." The man's name was Harry. Goosebumps prickled my skin as I read out the name. Suddenly, the planchette moved so violently it almost flew off the board. It spelled out NOW. Terrified, we complied. We carried the board and the clipping outside, creating a makeshift fire pit. As we watched the board burn, an eerie calm descended. The wind ceased, and an unspoken sense of relief washed over us. When we returned inside, we found the room just as we had left it, but the suffocating heaviness had disappeared. We spent the night there, huddled together, barely speaking. Weeks later, we learned that Harry's house once stood on the same spot as my grandmother's. He was known to have had a fascination with the occult, his death surrounded by mysterious circumstances. People claim the fire that took his life began from a Ouija board he was known to use. We never spoke of that night again, and we never meddled with the unknown. The three of us remain friends, bound by a haunting experience we wish we could forget. The world of spirits, we learned, is not a game. And Harry, I believe, found his freedom that night. As for us, we are left with a chilling story of a summer evening when we naively sought to converse with the beyond. We found more than we had bargained for, and in the process, we freed a trapped soul and learned a terrifying truth. Some doors, once opened, unleash things that are better left untouched. Even as a skeptic, I'd always been captivated by the unknown. I indulged this interest in the most harmless way possible, by buying an old Ouija board at a flea market. Just a conversation piece, I told myself. A week later, my best friend Ellen visited. As dusk began to paint the sky, we decided to experiment with the Ouija board. We placed our fingers lightly on the planchette, laughing nervously. "What happens now?" Ellen asked, her eyes wide. "We ask it a question," I replied, feigning confidence. "Is there anyone here with us?" The planchette jerked under our fingers, moving towards yes. We exchanged surprised glances, then burst into laughter. "One of us is definitely pushing it," I said, a light in my eyes. We decided to continue. Each question was answered, and with each answer the room grew colder. Our laughter faded. We hadn't been moving the planchette. It moved on its own. As the night deepened, a name emerged: Evelyn. Evelyn had been a resident of this house in the early 1900s, but she didn't leave willingly. She claimed she was murdered. As we pieced together Evelyn's tale, our previous skepticism vanished, replaced by a tangible fear. "Who killed you, Evelyn?" Ellen finally asked, her voice trembling. The planchette moved again, spelling out my own name. I felt a chill crawl up my spine and my hands trembled. "That's not funny," I said, looking at Ellen. She just stared back, fear etched on her face. Suddenly the room felt different, colder, denser. The air seemed to pulse with anticipation. I felt an unseen presence right next to me. "I want to stop," Ellen whimpered. But our hands seemed glued to the planchette. It was as if an invisible force held us captive. We tried to close the session properly. "Goodbye, Evelyn." But the planchette would not move to goodbye. Instead, it spelled out, "Not done yet." The lights flickered violently. A bone-chilling wind swept through the room. Ellen screamed as an invisible hand yanked her hair. Our terror escalated when we heard a woman's soft, vengeful whisper, "Justice." I threw the Ouija board into the fireplace, the wooden board catching fire immediately. The moment the board was consumed, the room returned to normal. The temperature rose, the lights steadied, and the eerie whispering ceased. Ellen left, traumatized. I lay in bed that night, heart pounding. Suddenly I heard a noise, a soft scratching from my closet. I pulled back the doors, revealing an old box. Inside, carefully wrapped in yellowed newspaper, was the Ouija board, untouched, unburnt. A note lay beside it, written in elegant handwriting. "Justice has not been served. Every night since I hear whispers, I feel cold spots in my house. I see the silhouette of a woman in the corners of rooms. Evelyn is still here, her anger and need for justice keeping her tethered to my home. And the Ouija board remains, a chilling reminder of the night we invited something unknown, something vengeful into our world. I was a skeptic. Now I'm a believer. But some truths are better left undiscovered. The lights dimmed. Only a few candles were flickering, casting elongated shadows around the room. The night was ripe for a horror tale, and 6 of us, huddled together in my old, decrepit attic, decided on a seance with a dusty Ouija board that I had found in a forgotten chest. The board was an eerie sight. Worn out and discolored with age, its letters almost faded but visible enough to discern. A small, heart-shaped wooden planchette lay at the center. I could almost feel a dormant energy pulsating from it, waiting to be awoken. As the self-proclaimed medium, I placed my hands on the planchette. The others followed suit, their faces a mix of excitement and dread. Our fingers barely grazed the wood, making sure not to apply any undue force. The room was silent, save for the distant hoot of an owl and the creaking of the attic floorboards beneath us. "Are there any spirits present here with us tonight?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The planchette seemed to stir underneath our fingertips, moving with a subtle, unnerving glide towards yes. A chill ran down my spine. We asked questions, innocent at first, about names, years, and places of origin. The responses were sporadic and made little sense, but with each movement our fascination grew. We laughed, nervously making light of the situation, but the mood had undeniably changed. The laughter died down when I asked, "What do you want?" The planchette moved again, this time with a sudden urgency. It spelled out FREEDOM. The room fell silent. Our jovial demeanor waned as the temperature dropped noticeably, and an unseen force seemed to engulf the room. Shadows danced on the walls, appearing more menacing, more alive. The sense of being watched, of being not alone, became overwhelming. I asked, "How can we help you find freedom?" The planchette started moving swiftly, spelling out a phrase that sent shivers down our spines. YOUARETHEKEY. The message was clear, yet we didn't understand how we could be the keys. "What do you mean?" I prodded. As if in response, the candles around us flickered violently, casting frantic shadows around the room. The planchette moved again, spelling out BEWITHME. A cold dread washed over me. Suddenly, the candles blew out completely, plunging us into darkness. A guttural whisper echoed through the attic, repeating the phrase, "Be with me." Panic ensued. Someone screamed. Another sobbed. We fumbled in the darkness, scrambling towards the door, but it wouldn't budge. We were trapped. I felt a sharp, icy touch on my shoulder, making me freeze in place. The same whisper, closer now, its words brushing against my ear. "Be with me." With a sudden burst of courage, I grabbed my lighter and relit the closest candle. The planchette had moved to goodbye. The air seemed to lighten, the eerie coldness gradually faded, and the door creaked open. We didn't sleep that night, nor did we ever mention the Ouija board again. It remains in the attic, a chilling reminder of the night we invited a spirit into our world. I often wonder about the spirit and its plea, but the question that haunts me to this day is, did it ever find its freedom? Or are we forever bound to it as its keys? Only the whispers in the wind and the unexplainable cold I sometimes feel may hold the answer.